This story of an Italian immigrant family with deep roots in Contra Costa County started with this 1957 Mount Diablo High School yearbook photo of George Baldocchi standing next to his 1956 Chevrolet Belair. Turns out George still lives in Concord, and he still loves cool cars. When I visited him to get a few photos of those vehicles, he let me know a little about his family's history in the area and how he came to own that cool car at such a young age, a bittersweet story. Upon arrival in California, the Baldocchi family, like many Italian immigrants, gravitated toward agricultural work. The fertile lands of Contra Costa County, including the Delta Islands and tracts near Concord and Antioch, offered opportunities for farming and land ownership. The Baldocchi family's most enduring contribution to the region is their role in developing and sustaining local agriculture. From the early 20th century, family members farmed on Sherman Island, Victoria Island, and other tracts, producing crops such as asparagus and row crops. Their efforts contributed to the economic vitality of Contra Costa County and supported the region's transition from rural to suburban landscapes. Joseph Baldocchi, an Italian immigrant from the Tuscany area, was one of the early asparagus farmers in California. Joseph and his sons Armando, Guido, and Nello farmed in both San Joaquin and Contra Costa counties. At the time of his death in 1958, Joseph was farming over 5,000 acres of asparagus and other crops. In this 1942 photograph, he is standing next to an RD-6 Caterpillar, which was used for working open ground to get ready for planting asparagus. In this photo, Joseph's grandson George Baldocchi, the same guy shown in the first photo, is sitting on the farm's Farmel tractor, which was used to work the ground for row crops. This picture was probably taken in the early 1940s on one of the Baldocchi ranches. But tragedy struck in August of 1943, when George was but 3 years of age. The Baldocchis had recently visited with family and friends in Colfax, and were on their way around Lake Tahoe on Highway 89 when the car they were driving broke down, and while attempting to make repairs on the roadside, Guido and his friend Paul Green were struck by an automobile near the Lake Tahoe Tavern. George's father Guido was killed instantly, and Paul Green, also of Antioch, suffered a compound fracture of the left leg and other injuries. George and his mom were also in the car but escaped relatively unhurt. The two men were struck by a car driven by Charles Hamilton of Sacramento. According to Constable Harry Johansson of Tahoe City, Hamilton was on the wrong side of the highway when the accident occurred. Hamilton was taken into custody and was held at the Truckee jail pending an inquest. But just 2 weeks later, a coroner's jury had cleared Charles Raven, a Sacramento tractor dealer, calling it an accidental death. But by that September, a damage suit totaling $72,000 was filed by Guido's widow against the tractor equipment company, to which a jury in June of 1944 awarded her and her son George $25,000 and Paul Green, who never fully recovered from his injuries, $37,000. Moving on from that tragic story to Dianda Plaza in Concord, which traces back to one man, George's stepfather Armando David Dianda, who transformed his family's longtime farmland into a commercial center in 1968. The plaza sits on land his family farmed for over half a century, making it one of the last major East Concord shopping centers, directly tied to an early agricultural family. This is where George Baldocchi steps back into the picture as the owner of Candlelight Liquor Store at the Dianda Plaza, which opened in 1969. George has long since retired, but as in 1957 with that Chevy Belair, his love affair with cool cars still burns as brightly as ever, as evidenced by this clean 1987 Chevrolet El Camino and his stunningly beautiful 1939 Chevrolet Restamod, which George offered me a ride in, an opportunity I was not about to refuse. George drives it sparingly, putting just a few thousand or so miles on it in 30 years. He calls it his donut runner, using it to cruise down to King's Donuts to pick up a few sweet delights on a regular basis.
And you've had it since you did the work in 96, or it was you bought it in 96?
I bought it like in 96.
Getting back to how George was able to own such a cool car as a junior in high school. Turns out it was paid for by his grandfather Joseph Baldocchi, who never got over the loss of his son in that awful 1943 Tahoe automobile crash and George's loss of his father. That concludes this episode of the Corridor Chronicles. May thanks to George for taking me along for this historic ride. Written and produced by Mark Harrigan with articles sourced from newspapers.com and a few of George's history books. Photos from the producer, Pinterest, and Google. Thank you for watching.